This is the story that I like to share with all our members of our Seventh-day Adventist Church that will understand that the prayer is the most important part in life. And this story is about my mother and her faithfulness and continually staying on a prayer. And I would like to begin from the time that she met my father. My mother comes from Belgrade, and my father is from Adriatic, Crkvenica. The church in Belgrade was built, and the opening was 1937. All the young men were asked to help in building the church. And this is where my mom met my father. They got married, and in the 1938, 39, we moved to Zagreb, where I was born. 1939, the war began, and most of the young men had to serve to free the country. And my dad belonged to the Partisans group, which is the freedom fighters for the home. In 1944, he was shot down as he was performing communication part between the partisans to know where the Germans were. Unfortunately, one of the town people had given the information to Germans. It was Sunday morning, February of 44, day 11. And he did attend that meeting where he was working, and on the 12th of February, he was shot down. I believe it was either 12th or 14th. I'm not sure. Well, anyway, that is the beginning of the sorrow. My mother felt that she did not fit in an area where she lived among the people in Adriatic, in Crkvenica. And language was a problem, her understanding the way of life. She decided she wanted to go back to live in Zagreb, where she was familiar. There were other families of Blaziks there. At the time when my dad was deceased or killed, she did go to the cemetery, not the cemetery, but where he was shot. The couriers came to the house to announce that he was shot, and they asked her if she would like to go and see him. And she definitely agreed to that. I was left to hold the hand of John, my brother. And at that point, when she left, she came back. She saw him dead, and her desire was to know where he was shot. So she started opening his coat to see where was the bullet. And all that. At that point, she was also expecting a child. She was 3 months pregnant. And all that stress and horror, it went basically on the child. And we know that the Lord provides the way of escape. Many a times we wonder why it was necessary. But my mother had to take care of 2 of us. And the life before her was very difficult. So she decided after that she was going to leave. And she found a connection with another lady that lost her husband, for a person that had a horse and buggy to take us to a certain place. First step was we traveled from Crkvenica to another port on a ship. And it was maybe a couple hours travel, but it was very difficult. We were all sick from the seasick. As we arrived to that other port, we were supposed to travel with a bus. Transportation was very difficult at that time. Being that it was open war, we had to wait and see which transportation we could take. there was a big truck that came. It's actually a truck. And most of the people, younger ones, they start jumping in. And so they realized that my mom is standing there with two of us and another bag that she had bedding for us and clothing. They helped her to get on that truck. And she was sitting at the very end in the corner and holding two of us. And at that point, truck was to start. And she says, no, please, let me get off. I don't want to go. So they did. They helped her to get off. About 20 kilometers from that area where they all got on the bus, there was a bomb that exploded and everyone was killed. After that, my mom found another way, another person that was going to help her to get to another town. And that was a man with one horse and this lady, a widow, with another child. And so 3 of us children and 2 women, we stayed on that buggy until the evening, and I remember I was 4 years old. We got to some kind of house where they kept ammunition. And they allowed us to stay there. The partisans were all around. And they realized 2 women looking for shelter. So we stayed overnight. And the next morning, we continued. We could see the military, in the edges from the road, hiding. And until we got to another town, from town to town, as we were traveling, my mom always prayed. And she was so firm in faith, in belief that the Lord has a way out from this and we're going to be safe. This trip took 7 days, from the time we started until we reached Zagreb. Zagreb is the capital city of Croatia. And we had a family, Blazik family. And so first thing, my mom decided she was going to go to church and talk to the pastors and see where the possibilities. Well, it was not available, anything. So we lived for about 3-4 months, maybe 5, at my aunt's house. And there my sister was born, Pauline. And my mom always made sure that we got to church, no matter what circumstances. In the church was a lady that has a place where she could give us 1 room to live in, but she waited for that to be vacated. And it was from Mussolini's army, a person that was there. And since this was already 1945, they were realizing that they're going to lose the war. So they were leaving the towns. Her name is Marta. I can't even remember. But anyway, we had to wait until that room was vacant, and this is where we moved in. We lived there for 13.5 years. My mother's desire was always that we should come to the United States. And she wants to go to America, but the financial situation and the way it was impossible. My grandparents, my mother family lived in Belgrade, which is the capital city of Serbia. And the year 1957, we were spending summer with my grandmother. And so we stayed there for a little bit, and we needed to return back to Zagreb, back to school. And so at that point, my mother found connection. Through her sewing ability, she had made a lot of friends, but through the church. And this family was helping those that wanted to leave the country. They had a connection. So my mother delivered that day. It was, I think, Wednesday. Delivered things that she had finished sewing. And this lady said, come in the kitchen. My husband is busy. There is a family that wants to leave the country, but they didn't make it today. And my mother says, where are they going? And she explained that they're going to leave to cross to Austria. And so this lady says, Smilja or Emily, would you like to go and take their place? And my mother said, yes, but my daughter is in Belgrade. And she says, fine, that would be Sunday, the earliest that we can go. And they agreed to that. They were going to help us. The same day, on Wednesday night, my mother sent a telegram to my grandmother. And as you are well aware, that telephone system was not available, so you get a telegram and you go to the post office where they connect you on the phone to speak to whoever the individual is calling. And my grandmother quickly, came to, and my grandfather, to talk to my mother to see what the situation is. My mother was talking almost like in a riddle, see, she couldn't explain because they were all listening. And my mother said she didn't have funds, that she needed desperately 50,000 or more. And my grandmother said, I don't have more than 50,000 to give you, but I can get Magda to get on a train on Saturday night and send her to Zagreb. And my mother agreed to that, and she says, fine, put her on such and such train, and I'll be there to wait for her. And so it was. I missed the first train, but there was another train right after that, another half an hour arriving. And I was on the second train, and my mother was in a panic because she locked the place where we lived. There was nothing to carry with. John and my mother waited for me, and they told me not to get off the train, just to stay on it. But it was already too late. I was already getting off. From there, we boarded another train that was headed to Slovenia, to the capital, Morska Sobota. And as we were on the train from Zagreb to Morska Sobota, I took probably about 7 hours. And as we were on the train, we did not speak to one another that much. John and I, we acted as we were separate from my mother. And because there were already people, military personnel, looking who is on the train, where are they going, where they're exiting. And as we approached that city, we were supposed to stay on the train. And my mother and we were told, when you see this lady with the kerchief, red kerchief, she is the one to wait for her. And so we were at the door, but however, she was coming in, so we quickly pulled back. And do you know that military already keep asking John and me, where are you headed? And we explained that I had to spend some time because I have asthma, and so to improve my health before the school starts. Well, anyway, this lady came in and talked to my mother. She had a basket with her. And we exited at the town Hodos. Now that town is half of the town Hungarian and half Yugoslavian. We got off there. We spent there from that Sunday evening, late in the evening, until the following Friday. We tried to help the family as best we could. John played with their little boys. They had the 3 boys. And my mom offered to make something, sew something for this lady. I did a little bit in the kitchen. But anyway, every day, this lady went to see our connection to cross the border if they were ready. Each time they said no, every day until Friday. My mother promised to the Lord, I am not going to travel on Sabbath. And that is it. And so Friday came. Before sunset, this lady came back. And she said, the time is right. They are willing to take you. And my mother said, it's going to be Sabbath. As we were going, we agreed we were going to go because we had no choice. We can't stay at these people any longer. As we were going, walking on the road, on the side of the road, suddenly we realized that there is a wooded area on both sides, very tall trees. And each time we hear the trucks coming in, there's a military, we would get into a ditch on the side of the road and lay low until they pass. We waited there. We prayed continually. And this lady went back and forth to the wooded area, wherever the connection's supposed to be. The man was very afraid, did not know who we were, how old we were. If John, as a young man, was violent, but John was only 15 and a half years old. I was 17. And finally, midnight, she said, yes, he is going to take you. And she said, just walk across this road to the wooded area, and you'll see he's going to wait for you. Well, midnight, dark, and he had a flashlight, and he kind of flashed to see our faces, who we were. He did not say much, but he said, you're going to follow me, first my mother, then me, then John, the last. We walked through all kinds of wooded area, but also where the ground was soft, wet, so that my dress would be wet and the bottom was just pulling me down. Before that, I had the two dresses, so I put one on top of the other so I don't have to carry it. And we finally reached the destination, his house. And he knocked on the door, his wife came in, and we were kind of frightened the way she looked. But she just pointed, as she opened the door, to our right. It was a door to the cellar. And she says, you go there. We spent their night. Sabbath morning, about 4 o'clock, this man came and he said, it is not the right time for us to go. We have to wait. But I'll take you to another room, another place. Well, as you know, the farmers, they have an area where they keep corn and other things, the winter stuff, prepared, and they had the livestock and things like that. And there was a door that led to upper room, and in that little room, I'm sure that they had done this before. They said, you stay here. We got in there, they locked the door behind us. My mom had the Bible in her purse, and that was Sabbath. And we stayed on a prayer. My mom would read different scriptures, Psalms, encouraging things. John and I, we never questioned my mother, why? Aren't you afraid? Nothing. Whatever she said, we did exactly. So we waited until that evening. It was approximately 9:30. They came for us, and they took us back into the same cellar. As we were waiting, I had difficulties breathing. My asthma was acting up. Didn't have enough food or drinks, and I contributed that to this. And suddenly, about 3:30, 4 o'clock, he came in and he said, if anybody asks, I'm Uncle Bella. And this morning we are going to go. The time is right. Well, usually there is so much fog. So if you can understand, it is about 500 to 600 feet to the border. But all of the trees are cut down on the side of Yugoslavia. And from there on, there are tall trees, Austria, Alps. And he would take us, and he said, we need to go, the time is ripe. The fog was very heavy. My mother wanted to tell him that we need to, pay him for it. And he said, no, I don't want you to pay. I just want you to pray. My mother prayed. Now, going back, that 50,000 dinar that my grandmother gave to me, my mother had another 10,000. That was 60,000 in total, the money that we had. They requested for each one of us 100,000. My mother said the Lord is going to provide. We did not worry about it because she was so sure that money is going to be there. And as she's trying to pay this man, knowing full well that she doesn't have the money, he said, no, I don't want the money, I just want you to pray. And so my mom prayed, and we were ready to leave from there. As we were exiting their house, it was a steep hill going up, and he was at the front, then my mom, then John and me, and I had a hard time walking because it was so steep and I had asthma. And so John is kind of helping me, pulling me actually up there. So finally we reached where there was a small road. Now road in a width of it would be probably about 30 feet, not more. But there was a stone or erected that would signify J for Yugoslavia, Hungary, H, and A for Austria. And he pointed out that we need to go just straight, not to turn left or right. Otherwise we're going to either return to Yugoslavia or go back to Hungary. And before he turned away from us to leave, he said to my mother, would you please pray again? And so my mom did. We prayed, and then he parted. He said, remember, if anybody asks, I'm Uncle Bella. He turned and left. Here we are, three of us looking. We are right in the middle of that road. And so he said, just go straight. So we quickly got into the wooded area, probably about 50 to 100 feet away from that road. Now, this road, every 100 yards, they had a house or the place where military would stand and look to see if anything is moving around the border. And as we entered that wooded area, we are not talking to one another, but just thinking. So as we are further down, we heard, it was Sunday morning, September 1st. We hear people talking, and I'm listening to try to find out what language. Couldn't make out, but somehow I found it was on the ground, a box of cigarettes, and it's in German. Now, going back to remind you that in my years of schooling, I studied German for 8 years. John studied French for 5 years. And so I could read it on a cigarette box that was in German. And I said, we are in Austria. And so that was the first sign that we were on the right track. And as we were going further up and up that hill, when we reached the top, we could see on the other end where there is end of the wooded area, and then there is open ground, nice and green, and I could see the road with electric posts, which electricity in Slovenia they didn't have at that point. And so I saw that, and I reminded myself, that's what we learned, that's what we know from the history. And as we came to the end of that wooded area, there was an opening field, and in the distance I could see a house, and it says Gust House. It's like a tavern bar. And we prayed again, and my mom said, now, we need to run as fast as we can to that house. So that's what we did. We are running to that house. We reached the place. The man of that place is outside sweeping. And my first question was, where is Polizei? Where is police? And he just motioned us to get in. As we got inside, there were men drinking and whatever, a lot of people talking. Suddenly, there is a military, 3 men from the German side that came. They saw us coming in, and they quickly, I'm sorry,
Okay.
And they quickly told us that we need to go with them. We were so glad. We were feeling safe. And being that was Sunday morning, 7 o'clock, they telephoned to the captain of the military army that there is a woman with 2 children crossing the border. And they brought us to him, knocking on the door. He opened the door. So he lived where the office was. And the first thing is, he said, do you have any guns? Do you have any gold with you? You know, we had nothing. My mom had the purse, and we had one little attaché bag. I don't know what we kept in, but anyway, he motioned us in. He realized that we were hungry and all that. He said, 9 o'clock, we're going to have a Red Cross bus come to pick you up. In the meantime, there is a little house here and store that you can go. And so he pointed us there. Now, we still had 60,000 dinner that we didn't spend. That's all the money we had that we came. So he changed 10,000 dinner into the shillings so that we could go, my mom could go and buy something for us. As we came to that store, you can imagine, had a little window, and on the display, it was one tray with the bananas and the rest of it chocolate and candy and this and that. Until then, we really didn't have ever tasted banana. And so my mom bought the banana, I think one, and I think one chocolate. And so that we would taste that, what it would taste like. So we divided it in 3. And we waited there until the Red Cross bus came. And so we boarded that, and we traveled a distance to town, the smaller town, but it's like a station for the Red Cross. It's called Jennesdorf. There is where we spent another 10 days until all the documentation that what my mother had told them, who we are, all our background, they had to check it out with Yugoslavia. And after 10 days, we were taken to another bus where they took us to the camp where we spent 19 months. In that camp, it's, I believe, remnant of the prisoners which they kept. There are a lot of Jewish people that were left there after the war. And we stayed in the barrack number 4. And we spent there 18 months, at which time we were acquainted with a pastor that would come every Sabbath to have a service for the Adventists, and they were approximately 8, 9, 10 of us. And the government of Germany allowed that, not Germany, but Austria, allowed that we would have services. Not only this, but the pastor went to the kitchen where they fed 3,500 people and told them that the Adventists do not eat pork and different things. So we were given extra oil that we could do some of our own cooking. And we stayed there and prayed every day. I continued at the church as an interpreter, translator, from German to Yugoslavian. And there's a picture that I need to show you. We had the Pastor Erbes, that was his name. And we stayed there, as I say, 18 months. 19th month, they took us to Salzburg. We stayed there for a month. From there, we boarded a train to Munich. But before that, I think there was a question, where are we going to go? So those that were going to United States, there were 3 families. And the rest of them were going to different destinations. And that was our trip. Now, we have boarded plane, and we came to New York. It was April the 9th. It was Wednesday morning at 8 o'clock at International Airport, where the pastor from Seventh-day Adventist Church in New York waited for us. That was our welcoming to this country. Well, after that, it wasn't long, about 10 days after we found the jobs where we were able to work and earn some monies where we would be self-sufficient. We rented an apartment that was furnished. We lived there for approximately a year and a half. And from there, we found another place. But altogether, we stayed in New York for 6.5 years. We moved to Chicago. And in Chicago, we lived 17.5 years before we came to Texas. In between, I was married. I have 2 children. And there are certain photos from the church in Chicago, North Shore Church, where we attended. And from there, we came to Texas, to Dallas. And from Dallas, a miracle happened where we have found property in Dawson. And we purchased that, where we live to this day. Now it's 38 years that we are here. And we found a church in Corsicana, Seventh-day Adventist Church, where we found our home. That is the portion of the story that I like to tell everyone, how God has led us, not knowing where we are going. We never questioned it. We believed that my mother, through her prayers, had been given answer, and she knew what we needed to do. John and I, we were very obedient. We never argued about this, wondering if this was the right thing that my mother made that choice. But I know today that that was the right choice.